To set the stage for those 10 words of hope that John gives to the world in 90 AD, we must see the breadth of how hope works throughout the Bible. So turn the page a moment. Turn back to the beginning, when God creates everything, removing the chaotic waters of uncreation, and he calls it very good. But humanity, desiring to be like God, thought that it was a thing to be grasped, and they ate of the very tree that God commanded them not to eat. Thus, humanity becomes exilic wanderers on the face of a sad world. It was not good. It grew thorns. Chaos broke in through death. In our desperate attempt to escape a fate such as that, we began to clamor our way into power, killing everything that got in our way. Such is the way of being human after we learned the bitter knowledge of the tree. We chose evil. Such evil causes an alien force to break through the cracks of time and space and seep into our hearts and our minds. Chaos began to seep into creation through sin. Ever since, creation has been groaning with an eager longing for everything to be made right again. Humanity, too, found themselves groaning for everything to be made right. This groaning, to the friends of Job who hadn't yet held their dying children in their own arms, meant rather little, just the babbling of a drunk woman in front of Eli. But for those who had suffered, there was a word for such a groaning. It was called hope. Hope came in many forms, but none more potent than exile. In a reflection of their ancestral heads, Israel was kicked out of the very good land that God had brought them to. And when they looked around them, they saw the chaos of uncreation breaking through the cosmological cracks that divided all of humanity. The hearts of many were too hard to see what God was doing. In a sense, the hard-hearted never suffered, because they never gave themselves the chance. No, they never asked, how long? Because they assumed they knew the answer. Never. Forsaken, cast off, or perhaps they simply didn't care anymore. Their mothers and their uncles and their great-granddads, after all, never told them stories about a God who saves. Only gods who grew wheat and made it rain. These forsaken sufferers had actually cast off their only hope in life and in death. They were truly, in a word, hopeless. But then, there were those who, with anxious longing, cried out to God. They said with their words and in their hearts, God, my God, why have you forsaken me? My soul pants for you, O God, as a deer pants for flowing streams. Will you cast off forever? How long, O Lord, how long? Will you be angry forever? You see, they knew something that the others did not. That even in exile, the Lord their God was in their midst, a mighty one who would save. He would not cast off forever, but his mercies were new every single morning. They knew that the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come back to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads, and they shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing shall one day flee away. They had an understanding that even if they were drowning, God would send his anointed one to bring good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to set the prisoners free. And so these prophets commanded in the midst of their exile, sing for joy, O heavens, and exult, O earth. Break forth, O mountains, into singing. For the Lord has comforted his people, and he will have compassion on his afflicted. And afflicted the people were, and afflicted humanity remained, trapped under the bondage of sin and death, enslaved to a cruel master. They went on, hard-hearted and spiteful. And so creation continued to long, continued to hope, in a God who would one day redeem. Then suddenly, in a flurry of motion and all at once, God seemed to break through heaven and earth, time and space, and reconcile all people back to himself. He had fulfilled his most potent promise to remove their hearts of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Now, there was no more room left for the hard-hearted sufferers to live their lives in bitter anguish. There was only room to love. And God continued redeeming creation, and is still redeeming creation slowly, so that all might hear of the magnificent flurry of events that fulfilled the hope of a suffering humanity. But now, a paradoxical paradigm emerged. He became the father to the fatherless, a servant to the sinners, a suffering savior, a murdered Messiah, treated as an impostor and yet true, as unknown and yet well-known, as dying, yet behold, he lived, as punished and yet not killed, as sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, as poor, yet making many rich, as having nothing, yet possessing everything. And he called his followers to do the same. There, the Christians found themselves trapped to an evil empire, Rome, dishonored, slandered, treated as the lowest rung of humanity, and despised. Even as famine raged in Jerusalem and women resorted to eating their young and men died in the streets of diseases, the people of the way continued to bring good news to the poor, to bind up these brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives in the year of God's favor and the day of his vengeance. The church continued to preach the gospel in word and in deed. But it didn't stop the soldiers who would break into homes and steal the children in the night, or drag the Christian mothers into the streets, or ruin the believers for refusing to worship the empire. The church found themselves once again as elect exiles, wandering a world who would spit them out as soon as they spoke of grace. John too was in exile when he wrote the last book of the Bible, the book of God's revelation to the world. John's book was a love letter to the hopeless, a tome to the dying, a missive to the captured. All of his friends had been killed by this point. He found himself all alone on a rock in the middle of the ocean. The ones he was writing to, also alone. Having watched their friends and family die by the hand of the sword or the famine or the plague, who was to blame? Who was responsible? How long would the Lord let this go on? And so, in the midst of this, John pens 10 words. These 10 words have become so foundational to the Christian worldview that every couple of years, someone tries to rob them of their significance by claiming that the end is near. Merely a boy crying wolf. These 10 words form the cornerstone of Christian hope and nothing less. Indeed, the hope of us all. For surrounded by the groaning of creation, a dying world, the martyred Christians, John looked to the heavens and he did not see a God who was taking vengeance, nor did he see a God who was absent, nor did he see an impersonal force or an idol or a mystic. For John, caught up in what God was doing, saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heavens and the first earth had passed away, and the chaotic waters of uncreation were no longer in existence. And John saw the holy city of a new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. You see, what John has in mind here, what John sees playing out before him, it's not a sentimentality. It's not good thoughts and prayers void of meaning. It's not a code to be deciphered. Remember, this is the John that likely recalls his best friend's murder, that he watched take place in front of him. So John has in mind here, as his audience, every person who has experienced the trauma of a creation still in eager longing. He sees every chaotic moment of uncreation folding in on itself. That kingdom is collapsing before his very eyes. The very chaos, mind you, that you yourself have experienced and are experiencing on a daily basis coming undone. He's speaking about every unmet expectation, every evil word, every fear and feeling of bitterness and shame coming untrue. John sees the undoing of every long goodbye as all creation is reconciled. Every friendship that has been cut short regained. All the people who have felt wayward and without a home now have their names written on stones known by the very king of this far kingdom. Every tear ever cried is now accounted for. John has in mind every man, woman, and child who has cried out to heaven in the night for lack of strength that now see why their prayers have had to go unanswered. John speaks to every person who knows that God is their strength because they are so weak. John hears the eucatastrophe of all creation as the symphonic blast of God's victorious trumpet rings out and all death is undone, everything sad comes untrue, every longing heart finally finds rest in the world we were meant for. You see, this is the moment where every story finally makes sense as they are brought to their final and climactic moment. Thus, John hears the God of heaven and earth speak from his mighty throne, saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away." And when injustice is therefore dealt with, God will not allow this chaos to break back in ever again. His kingdom will come like a king being born in a manger or an old tree growing in a field where many birds will find their solace. But for now, we wait for this distant kingdom. We wait for this magnificent beauty with only images that we catch in our minds, glimpses of what John saw that day. We can see it in the eyes of those we forgive. We can feel it in our hearts when we break free of shame. We can know it in our minds when we dwell together in unity. And because of that, we press on as exilic wanderers, carrying with us the joy of this future reality, bringing it into our world in any way we can, patient in affliction and thankful in abundance, knowing that every second of a person's life has been designed so that in life or in death, we might find that we belong to this kingdom. Our word for this silver reality is simply hope. Thanks so much. This is Bible Unbound. We'll see you next time. Hey, Austin here. Just a quick reminder about Bible Unbound and the content you just watched, which was supported by our funders over on patreon.com. Patreon is where you try to get a bunch of people to donate small amounts to fund a mission. And the mission of Bible Unbound is to discover the Bible by uncovering the gospel. You see, we are passionate about creating a community of people who want to see Bible-curious people understand the Bible by seeing the gospel and Jesus proclaimed throughout the entire thing. And so if you want to fund that mission, if you want to become a part of the vision we have over here at Bible Unbound, you can explore more of that over on patreon.com. We'd love to see you there. Thanks so much.